So today I'll be talking about the current state of the Open Academic Environment, or the OAE project. I'll be giving a little bit more information about where exactly it's at, what its current focus is, who's currently involved, where it's going, and so on. Before we actually do that, I'd like to start off with a small prologue and give a little bit of history. So I'm sure that we are all aware of the fact that OAE has actually been running as a project for quite a while. And that project in itself did actually produce a series of releases, a number of releases, that have been piloted and used at various institutions around the world, various continents actually. The last such release was the 1.4.4 release back in September 2012. This release is still available. It can be downloaded by people, can be used by people for those who are interested. And there's even a community-hosted server that is open to anyone that's interested in playing with this release, and that can be found at oae-community.sakaiproject.org. Now, having said all of that, back in September 2012, the project actually hit a roadblock, and I'm going to be very honest about all of this and try to give a full picture, or as full as possible. So some of the largest pilot deployments that we had back in September 2012 were New York University and UC Berkeley, both of which were running at around 5,000 users, total users. And both of them were actually starting to see some performance and scalability problems, and they were uncomfortable in scaling their environments up further, which they actually wanted to do, but they weren't comfortable doing that. On top of that, deploying the system and keeping it running and doing things like migration were actually quite difficult, and there were a number of issues with that. And then so all of those issues are actually technical issues. But then last but not least, there was also a certain degree of vision misalignment, or at least visions that sort of diverged quite a lot between the various stakeholder institutions. And this sort of caused the project to have a vision that was too wide to be realistic in a number of ways. So in September 2012, after a pretty thorough investigation, it was decided that re-architecting the system was the only way forward for some of the technical issues that we were seeing. And I think we also all agreed that a more focused vision was necessary to provide enough focus and to make sure that we can actually tackle things in bite-sized chunks. Now, there was still a lot of support that remained for some of the core OAE underlying concepts, which is sort of what kept us going as well. But it is very important to understand that that point in time, September 2012, represents a very clear breaking point for the project, represents a very clear next step in the project. And I think this is very important to understand. So you can either look at the current phase of the project as a next distinct phase of the OAE project, or you can even look at it as a completely new project, just based on what we've actually learned from the previous stage in this project. Now, the point being that this is no longer the project that we, as we knew it last year at last year's conference. However, we've decided to carry on. We've decided to keep the name because of the shared belief that still existed in the underlying concepts, and because the name itself, even though it's not the most catchy name, still describes pretty well what the system is trying to do. Although, even having said that, it's probably a logical step that now that the merger has taken place, and now that the Apereo conference is actually coming up, that this project's name will actually change to Apereo OAE as well. Now we just need to learn how to pronounce that, and then we can do that. So I wanted to be very clear about that breaking point, give a little bit of that history, make it very clear that actually represented a clean break in the project and what it was trying to do. So in today's presentation, I'll actually be talking about this next phase in the project and about what's been happening since September 2012. So what is it? What is it aspiring to be, and how is it trying to position itself? Then I'll talk a little bit about the goals, both from a technical point of view and a user point of view, I'll do a live demo, which will be the majority of this talk, and I'll give a quick overview on technology as well. So I'll say a little bit. I'll talk a little bit about the different technologies that are being used in this in this new architecture, as well as some information about performance, scalability, and contribution from the outside as well. And then I'll conclude by talking a little bit about what we see coming up next. Okay, so if asked to describe the OAE project at this point in a single sentence, then we would use what we call our tagline or a tag phrase, which is the OAE attempts to offer support for academic collaborations. And rather than me trying to explain what exactly that means, we actually have an animation that I think does a much better job at it, and so I'll play that for you quickly.
The open academic environment is designed to support many types of collaboration, like research collaboration, ad hoc student groups such as reading clubs, group projects, study groups, and collaborative courses, committees, or even your rowing club. Collaboration can happen as small lightweight groups to large active groups, even across different institutions. It's a network of content, people, and groups where you can share files and links, create documents, and work on them with multiple people at the same time. And you can provide feedback or participate in discussions. It provides powerful and flexible permissions, and it makes it easy to open things up to the wider world. All of this can be searched and discovered while easily reused in other collaborations. The OAE is the only academic system of its kind that's designed user-led. It's based on lots of input and testing from real students and real academics. This environment attempts to provide seamless integration with the systems you already use, so there's no need to enter the same data over and over again, and you can just focus on getting the work done.
Okay, so that was a very quick sort of 1 minute 20 high-level overview of what OAE is actually trying to offer, trying to be, and then in addition to that, there's these 5 keywords that we also tend to use to describe the project and some of its characteristics. The first one, and probably I would actually say probably the most important one, is user-led. This is important because we recognize the importance of design. We recognize the need to do constant user testing, constant research as well. And if anything, we want to increase that going forward as much as we can because we feel it is really important. The second one is integration, and this is definitely one that we share with the CLE project as well. There is actually a strong urge not to reinvent the wheel over and over again. And we're definitely trying to give a strong preference to integrating with systems that already exist. And a few examples there are integrations that we've done with Symplectic, for example, for profile information, or Vivo for profile information. And then the other 3, discovery, openness, and reuse, they sort of go hand in hand. It's important that it is possible for people to discover new things, and these can be all sorts of things, including people, that are of interest to you, and that you might be able to either use, reuse, get in touch with, and so on. And the system very actively tries to encourage these concepts as well. So before talking in a bit more detail about some of the technical goals of the OAE project, I want to show this slide, which was actually created by Yves Appelboin from the University of Pierre-Marie Curie in Paris. And this is a slide that he presented at the Eurosakai conference. To me, this slide is important because he's faculty, and he sort of came up with the slide himself, presented it himself. And it basically represents his vision for the future of sort of academic IT at UPMC, and he sees three environments sort of supplementing each other, and so he sees first of all what is listed here as Moon PMC. He sees the portal environment as sort of one side of that. He sees the LMS as another side of that, which is called My Class in this one. And then there's the sort of MySpace one as well, which he sees OAE filling the need for. Where the sort of MySpace, the role of the MySpace environment is to offer this free-form collaborative space that the students and researchers can actually use for all sorts of work. And this is not unsimilar to the analogy that Josh Barron has done with the OAE being similar to the library commons, where the LMS is more similar to the actual classroom. Now, what does this mean in practice? And it means that we see the OAE as being complementary with the LMS and the portal. We don't see it as being a replacement. One thing that's worth pointing out, and is definitely interesting, is the sort of middle bit of this diagram, where all three of these environments overlap. And I think that's where we'll actually find a lot of sort of shared data services, like shared profile data, shared content data, and so on. And I think that's actually an important train of thought, and I hope that train of thought can actually be one of the things that we discuss at the San Diego conference. Okay, so in terms of some of the technical goals that have been set when this kicked off back in September, these were definitely the most important ones. The most important goal was to try and provide a solid foundation that we actually felt was a proven foundation as well. So there's a lot of testing involved there. The goal was for this environment to be able to be used at a much higher scale than the previous system, a scale that actually exceeds the institutional level. And an additional goal was to be able to use this system as a multi-tenant, cloud-ready, software-as-a-service platform. This is definitely something that's emerging really strongly at the moment, and is something we want to be ready for. We think this will actually happen very quickly for a lot of environments, as we want to be ready for this. We want to be ready for this new deployment model. Additionally, we still think it's important to make it really easy for end users, so students, lecturers, researchers, to actually be able to contribute to the environment themselves and drive innovation, help us drive innovation. And therefore, we wanted to make some improvements to allow for faster development as well as faster widget development. Explicitly, it was not a goal to try and re-implement everything as fast as possible. The focus definitely was on trying to provide a solid and proven foundation, given this slightly more reduced scope that was outlined in the previous slides. One additional goal, and this is very important as well, is the desire to actually move towards the new UI designs that were being worked on last year, before some of these problems hit. And these are actually the first set of designs that were fully user tested in multiple iterations at multiple universities across the world. And we got some really good feedback on these designs, and there's a lot of belief in these designs. A lot of what they do is like simplification. We feel that's important. So there was the desire to move to these new designs as soon as possible, although we didn't want this to distract from some of the technical work straight away. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the features that have been implemented since on this new architecture. So there's permissions, users and user management, groups and group management, content, search, activity, multi-tenancy, the network, and mobile. So what we'll actually do is I'll do a live demo, and I'll hit each of those sort of feature feature sets or feature families, and I'll run through them as we hit them in the demo. This demo is a live one on a live environment. It uses our demo environment, which exists as of yesterday. This is a very light environment. It only has a single box that runs all of the components. That's mostly done to cut the costs. We do have a much larger environment, and I'll talk about that a little later in the talk. So what we've done for this one is we've loaded a small amount of data, which is 1,000 users, 2,000 groups, and 5,000 content items, using something that we call our dummy data loader or model loader, which actually generates random people, random groups, random content, and puts them into the system. So a lot of what you'll see on the screen will actually be gibberish, but we use it to generate content that actually represents real users and real usage as best as possible. You can use this URL to actually play with the environment. It should be up for the rest of the day. It will, in sort of the next couple of weeks, it will be taken down very often, but it will be on often as well, so feel free to check in there from time to time. Before we jump into the demo, note that the actual user interface isn't finished yet. It's still work in progress, and there are still UI gaps. We do think that all of the data services are there at this point, but there's definitely still gaps in the UI. Some of those gaps actually make it hard to do a demo where we can do a nice sort of scenario-based demo and actually see how people could use this for real. So that'll have to wait until the San Diego conference. One thing you'll also see is that some of the features on there are new features, are features that did not exist in the old system. And that's because we think that these new features are actually more important given the sort of the more focused vision than some of the old features. So that's why they've been given a higher priority. Okay, so I'll move now to OAE.oeproject.org. This environment is actually located in California on the Joint Cloud, so there might be some way you can see how it works. Okay. So in this small demo, we'll actually be using two different users. One of them is Jewel, the other one is Damien. They are both students. They are about to start working on a group project together, and they're still sort of trying to figure out what exactly they want their project to be about. One thing's for sure, they're very interested in the super collider, and so they'll probably be heading that direction. We'll sort of work through that. So this is the system's landing page, which has a copy of the animation that we just looked at, and sort of tries to explain in a high-level way what the system actually tries to offer. I mean, you can initiate a search from here, which is sort of the beginning of discovery-related functionality. There's definitely a lot more to come there going forward. It's possible for users to sign up to the system, create an internal account. This is configurable on a tenant by tenant basis. So I'm guessing that most institutions will actually not have this enabled, but if you want to, it can be enabled, and you can create an internal account which you can use if you want to use this environment yourself. And then there's this sign in, so I can sign in with an internal account, which I'll actually do in this case because that's what our model loader does. There's also different ways of signing in, so we've provided integrations with CAS, SAML, SAML2, and Shibboleth. So all of these can be configured from the administration UI, which I'll show in a second. They can be configured on the fly. They can be enabled on the fly. We've also integrated or provided an integration with some sort of with a number of third-party login providers like Twitter, Google, and Facebook. And so you can, again, whether or not this is enabled, it's all configurable on a tenant-by-tenant basis. So I'll actually go ahead and I'll sign into the system as a Jewel. So this is Joul's personal space. Um, and this basically shows everything that's related to Joule, that's related to her. And I think this is a good time to think back to think back to the animation that we were looking at, and how it was showing this network of people and groups, and how that actually was this triangle where things were flowing in all directions. And I think that's definitely a core idea of what OAE is, and I think that triangle comes back on this personal space. Um, so the sort of first corner of the triangle are users. So the triangle is users, groups, content. So the first corner is users, and so each user in the system has its own profile, rather than. So we actually fully assume that users will not want to re-enter their profile information once again. So we definitely assume that they'll be that this will work mostly based on integration with existing systems, with existing data. This is why we've done our proof of concept symplectic integration and our proof of concept Vivo integration. But the actual profile is not exposed in the CI yet, although all of the data services are there. So that's the first corner of the triangle. The second one is are the groups, and then you can see my groups there. And the third one is content, and that's where we actually think the core of the collaboration, or most of the collaboration, will take place. And so if you have that triangle, and the triangle is important to understand. So so basically, users can be members of groups, and content can be shared with them. Content can be shared with people and with groups, and groups can have members, which are users or groups. And content can be shared with groups as well. So that the sort of triangle works in all directions. And the thing that's actually in the middle of that triangle is activity. And activity is basically the thing that provides an overview of everything that is happening in that triangle, inside of the triangle. And that's what we can see here. I'll go into a little bit more detail in a second. So from a user point of view, there's not a lot of functionality enabled in this UI yet, but each user has its own profile, as I said. Each user can have a profile picture as well. It's possible to view other users, see their profile, see some of the things they've been doing. And we've distinguished between external and internal user IDs. So you can actually have multiple ways of signing into the same user account. So you can associate your Facebook or your Twitter account with your user account, and you can use both ways to sign into your user account. This means that it's also possible to just retain your user account when for some reason your single sign-on login changes, or even when you change institutions. This should be possible as well. So that's sort of the user side of the picture. I'll go into my library now and say a little bit about content. So basically, there are different types of content in the system. First of all, there's the uploaded files. There are links that can be added into the system, and we'll try to treat them as if they were just part of the system as much as we can. And then there are collaborative documents that can be created. So, as I've indicated, we think that that content is actually where the bulk of the collaboration will take place. And all pieces of content are individual units that can be shared individually with either users or groups, and are actually not bound to any context. Later on, we're planning to have some sort of folder collection type functionality that allows you to group multiple of these units into one and share them and use them as a group of content. And then all content is versioned as well, so each piece of content has got a version history. And right here I'm looking at my library, which basically allows me to see all of the content that's related to myself, which I've either created or has been shared with me. A quick sort of tangential comment is that in this page you can see an example of our list views, and our list views, they sort of it's like a consistent framework across the application that comes back in various places and basically takes care of showing lists of things in various places. Each list view has got three different actual views. There's the thumbnail view, which is the default one. There's the sort of the compact details view, and then there's the very compact view. Each list can be searched, and then one thing that's also interesting to point out is the different visibility icons, and this comes from some of the work that the URG, the user reference group, has been doing, which is basically it's an indication of the item's visibility. And this is done because for a lot of students, this will actually be the first system that they use professionally that will allow them to do things in the open if they wanted to. So the system will actually try and provide sort of pointers as to what the visibility is of something they're looking at and what the visibility will be of an action they're doing. So we can see that all of these are actually private. This one is visible to everyone at this institution. And this is a public one, and then each list can be searched as well. So I'll actually go ahead and I'll add some content into the system. So I've got this paper and this picture of the super collider that I'd like to add into the system. So I can just drag those here. Then I can change their title if I want to. I can remove or add additional files to this list. This message is sort of a summary message of what will actually happen to these to the files that you're adding. So it's saying that they will be added to my library and they'll be public and can be found, seen, and reused by anyone. So if I actually want to go ahead and change that, then I can change who I can actually specify who I want to share it with, so I can share it with people and or groups, and I can change its visibility as well to be either private, discoverable by anyone, or visible to anyone in my tenant, and public. And again, this is all work in progress, and so probably at least the wording will be changing quite a bit. So this sort of brings us to permissions. So there's a flexible permission scheme that can be used. So you can give users and group access to certain things. So files and content are an example of that. And so that can be used to determine access. Then there's the public, logged in, and private switches that are available throughout pretty much the entire system. And this can also be extended for other types of stuff in the system. One thing that was interesting is this was really tricky from a performance point of view to get right and get all of the permission checks that happen when you use the system to get those to be as performant as we want it to be. I think we spent the entire month of October actually working on this, trying to get it into a state where it could perform at scale. And I think we've managed to do it, but it was definitely a challenge. So in this case, I'll actually make them private, and I'll share them with my friend, who's Damien. So I'll update that, and then the description will actually change to say that they'll be added to my library and shared with Damien. They'll be private and only visible to the people and groups that I share them with, which is exactly what I want. So I'll go ahead and upload these. You'll see that there's a small progress indicator, and I'll see here that the 2 files I've added are now there. There's the Super Collider picture and the paper that I've uploaded. So each piece of content has a content profile, and when you go there, it'll basically show a number of things. It'll show the content metadata. It'll be possible to look at the revision history and look at all of the previous versions of the file. The content profile page will try to show a preview of the content as best as it can. And for links, it'll just try to do that as well. So there's a lot of there's a lot of types of links that we can actually show a real preview for, which I think is pretty neat. So it doesn't really matter where they are. Pieces of content can be commented on, So this is true for each piece of content. Next to being able to comment on something, it's also possible to reply to a comment. So you can actually start having some more targeted discussions in there. It's possible to share a piece of content, and it'll also be possible to see related content, so that we can offer a trigger to allow you to discover things that might be of interest. So I now go back to my library. So I'll see that both of the files that I've uploaded now have previews. So we have a preview processor running in the background to actually process these and generate thumbnails as well as previews for these content items. And we've actually made a fair amount of improvements to the old preview processor. It's a lot easier to install now. It's a lot more modular, and the quality of the thumbnails is actually a lot better. So I'll now go to the PDF, and I'll be able to go to its content profile, and I'll see that we've actually generated an inline preview for this PDF as well. And we can do this for all PDF files, all Office files, and so on. So I'll go back to my landing page now, which is my dashboard. And basically at this point, the dashboard only contains what we call an activity feed. And this is quite important, actually. It's the thing that provides an overview of everything that has happened, that is relevant to you, is of interest to you. And it gives you an idea of what you're supposed to be looking at, what you're supposed to do next. This came out really strongly in the research we've done, and came out as a missing link for people sort of know what they were supposed to be doing, and it's definitely really important to get that sort of collaborative loop really flowing and going. So you'll be able to see that we've added these two content items. We put this comment on the Super Collider picture. A couple of things that are interesting and worth pointing out here is that this activity feed does aggregation, which basically means that if a certain type of activity happens multiple times within the same amount of time, then we'll actually try and put them together. This is to avoid that the activity feeds completely overflow when, for example, a user changes a document 500 times in a row. So this is actually an example of this aggregation. So we uploaded two content items rather than generating two separate activities. We sort of grouped them together. It makes it much nicer to read the activity feed, to sort of see what's been going on. Next to that, it's also the case that we designate certain activities as being more important than others. Examples of these are someone commenting on a file that you've created, someone replying to a comment that you've made, someone requesting to join your group, and so on. And for these activities, we'll actually generate a notification as well, which is what we'll be showing there, although that hasn't been hooked up yet. But it's basically an overview of everything that we think is going to be really important to you and you cannot actually miss from the activity feed. All of these notifications will also generate an email notification to your email account. The activity implementation is based on the activities3.ms specification. Okay, so we'll actually now have a look at how this actually works for other users when actually collaboration is going on. So we'll go in and we'll sign in as the user that I shared the content with. Okay. So I can see that because these two content items were shared with me upon creation, I can see that they've been created. So I can see that Jewel actually did that whilst I'm Damien. And I can also see that Jewel actually commented on this piece of content. So if I were to go there, I'd be able to see her comment, and I'd be able to reply as well if I wanted to. And then in theory, I should be able to, there you go, this is being aggregated into a single activity as well. And then this should become part of the activity feed too. So I'll sign back out. I will sign back in as the first person. And over here I can see that Damien has actually commented on my comment as well. So there you go. So you can get that collaborative loop going really well. Okay. So links are very similar to uploaded files. One thing that is worth pointing out are the documents that can be created. And this is actually the first time that I can demo this, even though it's in a premature state. So I can create collaborative documents, and this is based on an Etherpad Lite integration, which are basically pretty lightweight documents that you can that you can edit with multiple people at the same time, so collaboratively. So maybe I'll make one project IDs, make it visible to participants only. I'll create it, then I'll be taken to that document, and then I can start. Whatever IDs I have. So I'd be able to share this with my friend, with Damien, and he'd be able to come in and start editing this document at the same time, so we could actually start working on this. I think this is going to be a really cool feature. There's a little bit more work required for the UI integration, so the ability to share it with people. But we think that all of the heavy lifting on the backend is done, so it's possible to publish these documents. They're all versioned, they're all revisioned, so I can actually I can play that back. There's all the security is taken care of. The previews are being generated when I publish. There's scaling. Performance-wise, that's being taken care of, which is using a sharding approach, and activities are being generated as these documents are being added as well. So it's all fully integrated. It's just a matter of cleaning up the UI a little bit more. And so, yeah, so this image is stretched a little bit, but you'll see that it's generating previews for these documents as well. And if the text were to be longer, it actually be showing quite a bit of that, which I think is quite exciting. And then the sort of the third part of the triangle are the groups. And so in the My Groups page, I can see all of the groups that I'm a member of. And basically, so I can create a new group, can give it a title, set its visibility. Again, these three options come back throughout the entire UI. And then I'd be able to add members to the group as well. Or I can look at one of the groups that I'm already a member of, and then go to its group profile. So the goal for groups is basically to these groups can be used to share content with, to send messages to, and there's sort of this sort of umbrella that allows you to do stuff with multiple people at the same time. And then the group profile isn't a destination per se. It's basically just a place where you can get an overview of everything that the group of people has done together, without that work actually having to have happened inside of this context, if that makes sense. So the group profile page, a group can have a profile picture. Each group has got its own activity feed as well, so you can get an overview, a focused overview of everything that group has been doing together, and the sort of most recent activities that happened there as a group. So that focused view is actually quite useful. There's the group library where you can see all of the content that's been shared with the group, and then there's the members, and I can add new members here. I can remove members. There's a group joinability. There's a few group joinability workflows as well. So your group can either be completely private, can be private, but people can find it and request to join. It can be a little bit more open, where people can actually join themselves, or they can just look at it without being a member, or they can request to join. And there's a few possibilities there. They can all be set by the group manager. Okay. So those are groups, and then the last thing that I wanted to show is the search capabilities. So those have all been implemented as well. So let's say that I want to search for Josh. Then I'll be able to see all of the people, groups, and content that sort of match the search query. Actually, if I clear this for a second, you'll see that there's a total of about 6,300 items in the system. These are items that I'm allowed to see because all of the searches are access scoped, which again was a challenging problem to get right from a performance point of view, but I think we managed to get it to a point where that actually works. And you can search for people only, you can search for groups and people. Any combination of basically groups, people, and content can be searched for. And given that this is actually running on a single box and it's running in California, I'm sure you can see that the performance is actually quite snappy. And we have tried this with much larger numbers of data with a similar performance. Okay, so let's say a little bit more about multi-tenancy now. This is where I think it becomes a little bit more interesting. So multi-tenancy is basically the ability to have multiple instances of or to have multiple institutions, all with their sort of own instance, but on the same physical installation. And a lot of this is managed through our administrative UI, which I'll show real quickly. So basically, this is our global administration UI. There's an administration scheme, and that there can be one or more global administrators. These administrators can actually make changes on a global level across all tenants or for specific tenants. And there's a global administration UI, and then there's a tenant administration UI as well. And there can be one or more tenant administrators for each tenant individually, and then these tenant administrators can make a more reduced set of configuration changes for the tenant that they're an administrator of. Similarly, there's a configuration scheme that is sort of all very, very modular as well, which allows for changing certain configuration values for either all the tenants at the same time or a specific tenant. Okay, so let's look at the tenant list. So as we can see, there's on this instance, on this installation, there are actually two tenants that are running. There's a Cambridge tenant and a OAE tenant, a demo tenant. So let's say that I wanted to create a new tenant for Georgia Tech. Just show that there's actually not a tenant there. So the administration UI allows me to spin up a new tenant on the fly without actually having to restart anything or whatever. So let's say you want to do this for Georgia Tech at gt.oeproject.org. Create new tenant. So it'll tell me that the tenant has been spun up on the fly successfully. Before I actually go there, I'll make some configuration changes as well. So I'll click this. Maybe one thing that I want to do is change the way in which people can authenticate. Maybe I no longer want to allow local authentication or people creating their own accounts. Maybe I don't want a Twitter authentication anymore. And so this is where I could configure Shibboleth or Cas, but I don't have any of those at hand now. So let's say we just want to enable Google. So let's save that. And then maybe one more where we will change the display language of the default display language from English to French. Save that as well. Okay, and then this is interesting as well. So we've put a lot of attention into making sure that the UI is very skinnable and can be easily skinned. And we've got a UI where this can be changed on the fly. So where the skin can be set on the fly. So I'll quickly do one with some values that I've collected. So I'll set an institutional logo, which is just an external file. Also what we call a branding image. I'll do this really quickly, just as we're already running very late. There you go. The link color. And then we'll do the panels. Just a second. Do this really quickly. Okay, so there's lots of things that can be changed here. They're all grouped into logical units, so I'll click Save Skin. So let's go back to the tenant and actually go to the tenant that should have been spun up on the fly. So you'll see that the tenant's been created on the fly. It's possible. It's no longer possible to sign up, which is how we configured it. You can see some of the colors that we've changed and the branding image that we've changed. It should now only be possible to sign on with Google. And again, all of this can now be rechanged on the fly as we want. So I think this is actually really, really powerful, really exciting. So time to go back to the presentation now. Okay, two more things that I want to say before wrapping up is the network capabilities, and this basically comes down to this is something that we've built in from the very beginning, is the ability to have tenant permeability, permeable tenants, it's a configuration setting for each tenant individually. Once you enable it, it actually becomes possible to interact with people, groups, and content at other institutions that have also chosen to be permeable. So at that point, it becomes possible to share content with people from there, add people from the different institution into one of your groups, and actually start working with them collaboratively. I think this permeability has a lot of potential and can be really powerful. And then we're also working on a mobile app, which will currently only exist of the actual activity feeds. The main UI has been designed to be very compatible with the iPad. We do anticipate different needs for smartphone applications. And so right now we're trying to keep that to a minimum and are focusing on the activity updates. These are the technologies we use. I'll quickly go over this. So Nginx is the front end, Node.js, Express.js as the app servers. The database is Cassandra, search is Elasticsearch, caching is Redis, messaging is RabbitMQ, and UI consists of just plain HTML, CSS. We actually use Twitter Bootstrap as our CSS framework, and JavaScript using jQuery and Cloud.js. The goal for the architecture is for it to allow for horizontal scaling, and we actually do have a cloud environment set up that we use for performance testing. This is a full-blown environment with all of the necessary redundancy and so on, and like multiple instances of each component. So we run our nightly and ad hoc performance tests, and that allows us to catch issues very early and optimize and fix where necessary. The current environment, as it's been set up, costs about $2,000 a month. So this is using the Join Cloud, and can support up to 8,000 concurrent users, which is actually quite good. And we found that if we double the infrastructure, we can actually support twice the number of users. So if we double our infrastructure, we can support up to 16,000 concurrent users. And we haven't actually done any tuning yet, so this is mostly an out-of-the-box component. Widget development, basically we've tried to make it a lot easier to develop widgets. We've added a lot of documentation. We're using the node package manager for widget distribution, and we're using Bootstrap, which will help some people to get up to speed faster. And this is a screenshot of our documentation UI where you can see both of the UI API documentation as well as the backend API documentation. Okay, so the summary. So the goal was to try and build a foundation. So it's a multi-tenant, cloud-ready collaborative platform that can be used at a high scale and at a reasonable cost, supporting ad hoc student/group projects, research collaboration committees, and so on. It can be cross-institutional as well, or it can offer support for it, and is complementary with the portal elements and so on. A 2-second summary on what's next. So the goal right now is to make the current functionality production ready. We think all of the backend components are there, all of the backend feeds are there, so it's a matter of closing the gaps in terms of the actual UI. Testing has already started and bug fixing is underway. We've had our first security audit as well, and the second one is being planned as we speak. The goal is to actually do a first release on July the 1st this year. First stable release. Once that first release is out, there's a prospect of a shared pilot between Cambridge, Georgia Tech, and Marist College, using the sort of multi-tenant capabilities. So using a single environment to host all 3 of the institutions. And it's very likely that this is actually going to happen. And all 3 of them are willing to turn on the permeability feature, which I think is going to be really exciting and be interesting to see what comes out of that. So I'll stop here. I realize that I've gone over time quite a bit. So if there are any questions, feel free to get in touch, and I'll talk to you later. Thank you very much.